Just at the bottom of Gordon's Hill on the inside line, the curve is significantly tighter than all the others. This was mainly so there would be enough space for the engines to successfully navigate the curve without hitting anything on either side of the line or coming off the rails if the train is going slow enough. If the train went too fast, it would tilt too much and come off the rails, whether the engine was pulling trucks or not. Most of the engines were careful when running over this particular piece of track. They knew it was for their own good. 87546, however, had other ideas. "You're all just scared," he scoffed. "You should try a bit of record breaking. Be a bit more daring like me." Edward rolled his eyes. He was one of the few engines who stood up to 98462 and 87546. "You, with all your speeding, 87546, should at least know better than to go tearing round tight corners," he argued. "Pah!" retorted 87546. "That corner's safe enough for engines to go at over 136 miles an hour. I am being incredibly foolish," snapped Edward. "Agreed," said Gordon. "Express engines may be fastest and best, 87546, but on a railway, safety and being on time both share top priority." 87546 just snorted in disgust. The railway was having a hard time keeping up with its demands. 2 of its engines were currently out of service. 98462 was being repaired following his accident, and Henry was still bricked up in his tunnel. This meant that more new engines were needed. The Fat Director had just brought in a second red engine while 98462 was in the works, and following Henry's spell in the tunnel, was in the process of arranging the purchase of a black LNYR Class 28 experimental engine who would later turn out to be James before he was painted red. The demand for extra trains meant that the engines had to work harder than ever. To add insult to injury, Gordon was sent to the works to have his safety valve mended. Henry, who had been let out of the tunnel, had helped Edward take over the express that day, but he suffered greatly from his illnesses, meaning that he couldn't take it out that often. So, the Fat Director grudgingly gave responsibility of the express over to 87546, who revelled in the opportunity. In the few days Gordon was being mended, he boasted about his responsibility to the others to such an extent that the Fat Director was beginning to wonder whether another engine should take the express instead. Then came the day that confirmed his thoughts. 87546 waited crossly at Barrow-in-Furness for the connection to the mainland. 5 minutes, he muttered angrily. Just then, another engine pulling a passenger train pulled in out of breath. Immediately, the passengers burst out, among them the Vicar of Wellsworth and his family, coming back from their holiday. The vicar was heading to Teignmouth to help his sister, brother-in-law and baby niece take their luggage home and stay the night with them. "I'm sorry, staff trouble," the engine panted. "Had trouble finding a guard." "Stop it, nonsense," snapped 87546. "You're just too slow. All of you engines are. You're all unfit for service. Why can't you just go and roll yourselves on the scrap heap?" The other engine gasped in shock. When 87546 had gone, Eagle, who had just delivered a goods train and heard everything, pulled up alongside the engine, who had stopped by the water tower for a rest. "Don't worry about him, he's always like that," Eagle explained. "He'll get what's coming to him, you mark my words." "I hope so, he deserves it," replied the other engine crossly. "He said we should just get ourselves scrapped if we can't go as fast as him." "Well, by the way he's going, I wouldn't be too surprised if he got scrapped first with an attitude like that," Eagle added. Things got worse for 87546 as the journey went on. At the next station, a signal had failed, and since he was the first train to arrive there, he inevitably had to wait while it was mended. 87546 seethed impatiently at this. "We should just go on through, we're late enough already," he moaned to his crew. "No one can say we disagree with you," said his driver, who personally wanted to finish the journey, if only to get home and away from his disrespectful engine. "But it's orders." "Pah! You're just a goody two-shoes, too afraid to take a few tiny risks," said 87546. "We'd be able to puff safely through the whole line if you weren't such a coward." "I'd rather be a coward than a reckless piece of scrap," the driver muttered to the fireman, who solemnly agreed with him. Half an hour later, amidst the complaints of the passengers, not helped by 87546 insults, the workmen had fixed the signal. By then, some of the passengers had decided they had had enough and had left the express. Some exchanged their tickets and caught another passenger train on the other line, which was hauled by Edward. Others refunded their tickets and either caught the bus or walked home. This made 87546 crosser and crosser. When the guard blew his whistle, 87546 started almost immediately jerking the couplings on his coaches. "Ow, ow, ow!" they screamed. "We don't like that, we don't like that, we don't like that." Every wise engine knows never to bump coaches, or else they will pay them out. "Shut up and get moving," snapped 87546, utterly incensed with rage. "We're late enough as it is." "I don't think I like where this is going," groaned the driver. "Why's that?" asked the fireman. "Because of a story I heard about an engine who wouldn't stop no matter what," the driver replied. "I used to work on the Mid-Sodal Railway, and I heard a story about an engine called Albert. He was a horrible engine and thought he knew better than anyone, including the manager. He tried to rush his work and ended up running dry, using up all his water. He got scrapped as a result, and well, by the way 87546 is going, I wouldn't be surprised if something bad did happen." The driver was right. They were climbing up Gordon's Hill when 87546 started to pick up speed. Since his train was now half empty, he didn't need a bank as much. He was also a strong engine, built as an experimental prototype to pull heavier loads than engines like 98462. The driver, expecting the worst, fought for control. What made matters worse was that they were on the down line, the same line as the sharp corner on the other side. When 87546 saw the curve ahead of him, he realised his mistake and tried to stop, but the force of the coaches only made him go faster. They decided to take him out, and they were pushing him down the hill. The driver fought to reduce speed, but they were still going much too fast. Acting quickly, he and the fireman jumped clear and the guard slammed on his brakes, while 87546 just shut his eyes. The front half of the train tilted to one side, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The second stopped with such a jolt that the coach, who was now at the front, suddenly found itself resting in between the sleepers and the ballast, with a rail running right underneath her. Edward, who was the banker at the time, rolled up alongside the wreckage. It was worse than he thought. 87546 was blocking two lines. He and the front half of his train lay on their side on one track, right in front of Edward, while the other half of his train had stayed upright on the other line. A crowd of passengers had gathered around the train. Some of them were groaning. Their faces suggested they had been hurt. Then Edward saw one of the passengers being carried on a stretcher. He heard Gordon's whistle in the distance, and the big engine puffed up the hill behind him. He replied with 3 blasts. "Stop, Gordon!" he called. Fortunately, the signalman had been told of the accident. He set all the signals in the area to danger and told Gordon to proceed with caution and be prepared to stop when needed. Gordon had needed to stop anyway for a banker. He opened his mouth to demand why such an important engine needed to stop. Then he saw the passengers and promptly shut it. "Get the injured passengers to the last station, fast as you can, Edward," came a familiar voice, who then told 87546's guards to phone an ambulance and meet the train at Wellsworth. Edward, knowing who the voice belongs to, quickly ran to the bottom of the hill while Gordon and his crew, acting instinctively, uncoupled themselves from the coaches and raced Surrey to fetch the breakdown train. "This is why I never liked those big engines," snapped the Fat Director. "I would have hoped you'd know better than to do something as stupid as this 87546. An engine of your size should never go that ridiculously fast. Even Gordon knows that. Because of you, 16 passengers were injured, one, the Vicar of Walsworth, seriously." "It wasn't my fault, sir. My driver made me go faster," replied 87546. "No, I didn't, you liar! You wanted to go faster just because we were delayed by a broken signal," corrected the driver. "So, not only have you put your passengers in danger, but you have also just lied to me," yells the Fat Director. "I have had it with you, 87546. When you're mended, you can stay in your shed until I decide what to do with you." So he left 87546 in the shed for a very long time. 87546 resented him for this, and made whatever job he had when he was taken out to take over from us difficult. He and 98462 paid the price for their foolishness eventually, though.